nice rock. We're getting down into the Mojave Desert terrain here. Well, not quite yet, but here we are. I'm soaking my feet at the salt flays. Notice the hiker hostels to my toenails. All right, let me explain. Yeah, well, yeah, things got a little crazy. What can I say? But yeah, so I'm just soaking my feet and painting my toenails. But actually, G.I. Jane got this toenail polish in her resupply box, and there were 30 of us staying at this place. It's called the Hiker Hostel. These people just want to meet people who are hiking this trail. So when you get to Agua Dulce in Southern California, they basically have signs everywhere saying, "Come here." They have a nice place to stay, a big trailer, tents all over the place, and they feed you. I mean, it's just incredible what they do. They let you borrow your car. And so there were like 30 of us staying there, driving all over the place, buying food, using their car, and then G.I. Jane gets her toenail polish, and she starts painting everyone's toenails. And by the time she got to about 15 people, you know, she'd gone through all the women, and then she started talking a few guys into it, and then before you know it, like, most of the people had their toenails painted. And it was like, if you didn't get your toenails painted, people were like, "What's your problem?" So I was like, "All right, okay, paint my toenails." But man, I tell you, I was so embarrassed at future times on the trail when I, like, you know, 500 miles from here, I still have this toenail stuff on my feet. And so, like, when I got in the Sierras, this guy took me in for like 3 or 4 days because I had this rash all over my body. And I'm just come out of the shower, totally forgotten, and I look down at my feet. This guy doesn't know me for Adam. He just picked me up off the sitting in front of the grocery store, and I come out of the shower with toenail polish on. And I'm like, "Well, let me explain." You know, it was funny.
Are you the hairy leg there?
I'm actually the one right closest to the toenail polish. Oh, okay. That's mine. I don't know who that guy is.
The long toe. You got long toes, dude.
I guess. This is me at mile 500. I'm trying to kind of do the 500 thing, you know, my mouth and my hand are 2 zeros. So then I've got duct tape all over the top, or Mylar duct tape to the top of my hat to try to, because I'm coming down into the Mojave Desert and I'm anticipating some pretty intense heat. So this is just this little oasis right before you dropped into the desert. It was so pretty. Yeah, it's just amazing. And this is it, you know, look off in the distance, see a big sand dune out there in the center of the desert, and we just basically walked right across that thing and got into the hills on the other side. So it wasn't much of a time spent in the desert, the actual Mojave, but you know, it was still over 100 and hot as hell. So more sand dunes. This guy was a trip. He let PCT hikers. He's this old desert guy who'd been living in the desert for ages. He's a Harley biker dude in his younger days, and he fancied himself a poet. He thought he was a poet. So he had all his poems all over his house, and there were no water. This was like a 60-mile waterless stretch, and so the only place to get water was at this guy's house. So you walked in there, you introduced yourself to the guy, and oh man, I was the first one there that day, and I got there at 10 a.m., and he took me into his house, and we're sitting there talking, you know, just trying to have a pleasant conversation. This guy's like just a trip, and at one point, he just like randomly turns to me, and he's like, "Boy, I'm gonna tell you the fucking truth." You know, every other word was F with this guy, and so he proceeds to tell me that, you know, his philosophy on life, and I'm just like, my eyes are slowly getting bigger, and I'm just like, the guy was just out there, but as you can tell by his poetry.
And he's living away from any town.
Yeah, he's living in the middle of the desert. Yeah. In this, I mean, this is his house right here. He's got poems all over it.
Oh,
God. Supposed poems.
So he's there for the. He didn't do the PCT.
No, he didn't. But he liked PCT hikers because he was a Harley guy in his younger years, and he did a lot of traveling all across the country, and you know. So he kind of liked people who sort of did that kind of thing, traveling, and so he wanted to meet people like us, and you know, we needed water, so it was kind of, but it was cool because the guy was just so, I never met anyone quite like him, you know, and it's kind of cool to meet somebody who's that unique, I guess you could say, because he sure was unique.
And the signs are all like he had a perfect, like went in and had the prison with this.
Yeah, I mean, I really felt like I'd walked into like a scene of Mad Max. There were like, and then the guy was super dirty. He was even dirtier than we were, and he had like random like junk all over his yard. You know, it was like post-nuclear war type scene. You know, it's just really funky.
It'd be very well
Joshua trees in the Mojave, and then there I am. We're almost getting to the hills on the other side, which I'm pretty happy about. There's only about 20 miles across the Mojave proper, so you know, one day you just basically get up early and motor till you get through it. Stop at Jack's house, get some water, wait out the heat of the day, and this is Tehachapi Terry, we affectionately called her. She was a friend of G.I. Jane's, and we were walking with her at that point, so Eric and I went with her to Terry's house, and Terry once again took incredible care of us and fed us and let us take a shower and do laundry and rented us movies.
You shaved some?
I shaved at the Sulfleys, yeah, at that where the toenail paint thing happened. I shaved my beard and my head at that point.
And your legs and your armpit. You were going.
No, I didn't go that far.
You were going. You like that toenail polish.
And here we are getting into the Southern Sierra, so there's starting to be trees again, and so we're excited at this point that we're getting into some trees and the desert's finally behind us.
Oh, wow.
This is a little horny toad. Funky little thing, man. It's just,
That's so cool.
yeah, half lizard, half toad.
Did you pick them up?
No, I didn't. But then just when we thought we were out of the desert, the trail makes this abrupt turn to the east and we enter the most barren desert of the whole trip. Man, it was like such a mental mind game at that point because I was so tired of the heat. Pretty barren. This is what happens to your feet when you're walking through the desert. It's just like you just get so dirty, man. There's no, I mean, you can't bathe. There's no water to bathe in. You just like, and you're just walking for days and days. Yeah, and there's my toenails. But at least I have my toenails. So I do have some culture. So they're getting a little higher up on a ridgeline here, and there's the first view of some of the peaks in the High Sierra. Snow cap. Nice sunset. Sierra foothills. Last day of May here. And here's where, this is called the Domelands Wilderness. There's a huge fire here. It burned 180,000 acres. And this purple flower was actually known as poodle dog bush. And it caused severe contact dermatitis. And we walked late the day before we got to this location, and we were walking into the evening, so it was dark, and we were in this burned out area, and there was ash everywhere and soot. And so I was looking for some grassy place to put down for the night so I didn't get ash and soot all over my gear. And I saw this brushy, sort of flowery stuff, and so I put my gear right down there and went to sleep. Next morning I woke up, and I was right in the middle of a patch of purple flowers, this poodle dog bush. And so a day later it started. It started on my arm, and within about 5 days it was all over my body. My arms were so swollen that when I bent them, there was a big ball of skin that came up right in my elbow. And I was in the middle of nowhere at that point because I got to the next resupply location, Kennedy Meadows, and then the rash started, but I was like, oh well, it's just a little rash, no big deal. So I walked on. And 4 days later, it was bad, and I was.
Painful or itchy or both?
It was so itchy. I couldn't wear synthetic clothing. Synthetic clothing just made it crazy. It wasn't oozing. It wasn't like a poison oak. I read about it in the guidebook, and I didn't even realize that I had slept in poodle dog bush until a couple days later. I started to get a rash, and then I started to put two and two together that. When it wasn't weeping, I knew it wasn't poison oak, and I hadn't seen poison oak for a long time, and so I was like probably 25 miles from the nearest trailhead in the High Sierra when the whole thing came to a head. It was, you know, I had a slight fever, I couldn't sleep well, and I couldn't wear any of my synthetic clothing because it just caused unbearable itching. And at that point, I decided I had to get the hell out of there and just go to some place where I could take showers 4 or 5 times a day and just get to the point where I was